Hey guys, Canadian Range Nut here. It is Monday, June the 13th, 2022. This is actually the second video I'm putting out for the day. I'm driving right now, so that's why it sounds kind of weird. But I figured I'd fire this podcast off while I could. This is more of a personal podcast. I was looking at one of the comments, and somebody had asked me to do a podcast on the perspective of an anti-gunner because I told you guys how I used to be against guns. So I'm gonna try to get into that. Now, when I was an anti-gunner, now I wasn't a total lefty as far as there should be no guns whatsoever. But after all the mass shootings in the States and stuff like that, as a younger guy, I was totally manipulated by the media and stuff like that too. So I will admit to that. So basically, my thinking when I was an anti-gunner was that no one needs a gun. What do you need it for? All these shootings are happening. Why risk it? You know what I mean? Even though it's fun to have, why would you risk owning a gun where it could accidentally go off? Blah, blah, blah. Again, totally as an uneducated person who has never dealt with guns. When I thought like that, I didn't even consider the amount of guns that were already out there. And, the logistics as far as these buyback programs and all these options that the government in the States had tried to bring in, and even in Canada, right? I remember I used to work at a grocery store when they were trying to bring in the long gun registry. I think it was 99 or something like that, 1999. And I worked with this guy named Joel, and he had a shotgun. He used to go hunting all the time. And, I was like a 22-year-old punk, and I'm just like, yeah, they should take all the guns. They should get rid of them. And he kind of gave me the attitude. He's like, why should you take all the guns? Why would you want to register them? Blah, blah, blah. And, yeah, I just didn't have the education and awareness about what guns would be used for and stuff like that. And I used to actually have that mentality too, well, what do you need to hunt for? You don't need to hunt. We have agriculture now, just put they use the slaughterhouses. Now I have a totally different view of things. But anyway, let's stick to the anti-gunner perspective that I used to have, because the two sides are so divided. I was watching Bill Burr stand-up comedy, and he was making a great point. He said that, for guns, you're either totally for it or absolutely against it. And I feel like that's totally true. So I was watching a lot of mainstream media back in the day, just constantly seeing these mass shootings. I remember after Sandy Hook, I was like, well, they got to get rid of those guns, And it didn't help that the media had always, and not, I'm talking the news media, but movies and stuff like that, had always painted, the South as rednecks, and, the South, they're uneducated, all they care about is their guns, right? And when you're young, you're just stupid, and you just buy into it, right? That's what's so scary about what's happening with our generation now. I remember people would say on the issue of tyranny, the Second Amendment, how it's to prevent an authoritarian government. You guys, this is for you guys in the States, to keep your militia well trained in case a foreign or domestic power comes in. I just remember hearing that as in my 20s and thinking that just sounds ridiculous. World War II is over, and I'm a big history buff. I remember in history they always talked about history repeating itself, and in World War II, in the Hitler days and the authoritarian days, just seems so far away. So again, that was kind of my perspective when I just thought, well, you don't need a gun. Why? What do you need a gun for? Then when COVID hit and we were forced to lock down for basically 2 years, that changed my whole perception on things. It kind of made me realize that we don't really have rights unless we give them to ourselves. Look at, in Canada, for example, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Look how many people are unable to travel if they're unvaccinated in Canada still. In Ontario, we just got rid of the mask mandate yesterday, right? So, my whole life, I'm 44 now, but my whole life growing up, I just didn't ever see the need for something like a Second Amendment and something like gun ownership and stuff like that. And it never really crossed my mind about personal defense when I was an anti-gunner. I think as I got into my 30s, when I saw more situations in the news, as far as I remember one time in Binbrook, Ontario, there was this guy who had shot someone who was on his property. They were trying to steal his truck. And I remember thinking, I think I was like 35 or something. I was like, yeah, well, if you're on my property, I'm not going to risk you coming in and killing me. So I think I started to kind of change my views at that point, right? But I think what solidified it for me, and I mentioned this before in one of my other videos, how the McCloskeys in St. Louis with the Black Lives Matter riots, when those were going on, when McCloskey, the lawyer, had a AR-15, and he just kind of stood there with his AR-15 and his wife, and then the mob of people just walked by them. That kind of was the final straw for me, and that's basically when I started to think, oh man, we should probably get a gun with the way shit is going over here, pardon the language, but that's, I didn't feel like filtering that. So I started looking into all the gun laws in Canada and stuff like that, and realized that our gun laws here are 10 times more strict than what you guys have there down in the States. And I started to really follow a lot of conservative politics, and just kind of really like waking up as far as gun control came. But another reason I think I was kind of an anti-gunner is it's because of where I grew up. Like I grew up, my parents, my dad owned a restaurant, and we were a middle-class family, never got into fights or anything. We lived in a very safe neighborhood, right? So even then, didn't even the thought never even crossed our mind about some like a home invasion or any of that kind of stuff too, right? So I think that a lot of that kind of background definitely comes into play for me. I remember the Columbine shooting in '99 too, thinking, how could these guys kill all these students? And again, I was just like, what do you need a gun for? But again, it took a while for me to switch to the perspective of everybody has a right to defend themselves. So that's basically, now it's interesting because I don't even think that's the full perspective of an anti-gunner, because I think if you're like a total lefty, at least this is what I see in a lot of the people who I'm seeing on social media and stuff like that, the people who are totally against guns, they're totally fine with being defenseless. Like they're totally fine with just calling the cops, waiting for the cops to get there, waiting 20, 30 minutes. Some people, let's face it, like to be a victim. And I have always been the type of person that I don't ever want to be a victim. If I can do something about a situation, I want to do it instead of just bitching and complaining about it. So I think really, like that person who asked me to do this video, I think to get a full anti-gunner perspective, you've got to really talk to somebody who's still against guns, because, and you see it on the media all the time, like with all these groups who want to just ban all handguns. They're not even thinking clearly. They're kind of misguided in their ignorance, basically, because they think that by banning all guns, nothing's ever going to happen again. No crimes are ever going to happen again. I find they're kind of the same as these people who think that we're going to get to COVID zero. No one's ever going to have COVID. No one's ever going to get sick again. We've heard crap from the media for 2 years telling us about, if we share pencils and, touch the table that a person just touched, we could get COVID. I don't know if you guys remember. I remember going to the grocery store and wearing I had a ski mask because we couldn't get the regular surgical masks yet, and just hearing that over and over. So I feel like with guns as well as with disease and stuff like that, I think you're just always going to get those people who just never want to face the realities of what life is like. Like, let's face it, life is dangerous. Life is, people are going to die. People are going to get hurt. But they also don't want to face the fact that there are bad people out there. And I notice a lot with these super liberal minded people is they don't want to face the fact that there are evil people out there who are out there to hurt us. And I remember when the COVID stuff first happened too, and when the government was trying to lock us down, you hear a lot of conspiracy theories and stuff like that. And just thinking as yourself, you're just who would ever want to control all this kind of stuff? Why would they want to do that? Because you're thinking from your own perspective. But there are some really sick people out there who don't care what they do to other people. So again, I think to get to a true real anti-gun perspective, you got to kind of look at how those anti-gunners are as well. Anyway, that's the gist of how I used to think as an anti-gunner. Now don't get me wrong, I do believe in background checks. I think if you're going to get a gun, there should be a background check because, again, we don't want people who have mental issues to own a gun, right? I think that I think that makes common sense. I don't know if you guys agree with me on that or not. But to say that we need stricter laws in Canada now, I think is just ludicrous. And again, I think a lot of the people in Canada, even in the US, there's a lot of people on my channel who've commented they're shocked that we can't even conceal and carry in Canada. But especially a lot of people in Canada, they just watch the mainstream news. They don't bother to look any deeper into the issue, and they seem to think it's still easy to get a gun in Canada. So anyway, I think that's how my perspective used to be on being an anti-gunner. If you have any questions or comments that you want me to answer, or even if you used to be against guns and maybe now you've changed your mind, let us know in the comments below. And I gotta end it there for today, guys. Thanks a lot for listening, and I hope you have a good night.